Welcome to Technado.
Welcome to another episode of Technado. I'm your host, or one of your hosts, Sophie Goodwin. And before we get started, I just want to take a moment and thank the sponsor of the show, ACI Learning, the people behind IT Pro. And just a reminder that you can use that code Technado30 for a discount on your IT Pro membership. Of course, I'm not alone here. I've got Don Pizzette here to my left. You know the drill. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited. I do feel like I missed a memo because you guys are all wearing shirts that tell a little bit about you. So Daniel's shirt says hacker, which, he does our cybersecurity stuff. And Sophie's shirt says grandpa. So apparently, Sophie, are you now a grandpa?
Are you going to congratulate me?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm very excited. I thought she got a new grandpa. And that's
I adopted him.
Yeah.
He was all alone.
Sweet.
He just needed some grandkids, to spoil. So, yeah. No, I'm raising grandpa awareness is what this is all about. So, thank you. Appreciate it. And yeah, of course, our hacker in resident, Daniel, is here as well. So,
hola.
Yeah.
Glad to be here. Going to be a lot of fun. We've got some interesting articles today.
We do. We have some stuff that's, what you would expect from Technado. And then we have some things that we're going a little bit off the beaten path. So
hard-hitting IT journalism.
Hard-hitting.
So we're going to spend like a good solid 4 to 5 minutes on tech news, and then we're going to hit this one.
4 to 5 business minutes. Yes, of course. So we'll go ahead and jump into our tech news. First up, we've got an article here from Bleeping Computer. It says Microsoft drops SMB1 firewall rules in new Windows 11 build.
Cool. Next article.
4 to 5 business seconds on this one.
Yeah.
So was this? I have not been paying much attention to honestly anything in the recent days because I've just been busy. So is this like an unprecedented thing? Were people surprised to hear this?
So it depends on how you're looking at it. So SMB1 going away is not a new thing. SMB1 is ancient. It's been around a long time. And so it's no surprise that that's being kind of turned up. Now, the support is still there, right? You can create your own firewall rule and so on. But what is interesting to me here and what is kind of setting the new precedent is this is one of the first times that Microsoft has actually removed a firewall default or changed a firewall default so that when you move from one version of Windows to another, you may end up in a situation where a protocol stops working. And it's not that the protocol isn't turned on or configured, but the firewall is no longer allowing it. And I've known this day was going to come ever since they introduced the Windows firewall, which was forever ago. I forget when. It's been like 20 years, I feel like.
It's been a while.
And so, they had a pretty hardened firewall policy in the beginning, and then they slowly added things as like IPv6 popularized and multicast DNS was needed and all these other things. They started opening those up by default. And so on a fresh install of Windows, there's actually a ton of ports that are open by default. It's not insane, but there's a lot. This is one of the first times that I've seen them pull back and actually close some ports. And that's something that we need to be aware of. If you support Windows out there in the real world, when you upgrade from one version to another, you start deploying a new version of Windows, you got to pay attention to whether the firewall rules are there that may have been in place for 20 years and are now gone.
Yeah, I will tell you what, Windows kind of is a bit of a pain, which lets you know that they were actually trying to do something security-wise. Because I remember when they started making ping was firewalled off by default. And the first time, of course, I was unaware that actually had occurred. So I'm like, okay, I got to ping this. What do you mean it's not responding? I know it's awake. Yep, it has network. What's going on here? And I had to drill down and find, they've started firewalling this. Gotcha.
Yeah, sessionless protocols have struggled quite a bit over things like that. I've run into things recently where it used to be that if you had two programs running locally on your computer and they were talking to each other via the loopback address, right? So 127.0.0.1, they could talk to each other on whatever port they wanted. The firewall didn't mess with it. And there have been changes in the last year or so where now the Windows firewall and some of the other security components do actually get involved. And I've had to create firewall rules to open up a port from the host to itself, which I've never had to do before, but I had to do probably 3 months ago. So, there's changes afoot, and for most end users, they won't notice. For those of us that have to support Windows in the workplace, it's a whole new world.
Yeah, I always like trying to figure out which ports they'll actually allow, especially for egress, because I do a lot of, hey, send me back a shell, and if you're trying some rando port, it's probably just going to be blocked off by the firewall by default. So I always kind of commended Microsoft for the Windows Defender firewall and the Windows firewall for actually having good egress rules. Of course, you just bypass that by using a known port that you know is going to be open, like 53 or 443 or something that's probably not being used by another program. And yeah, you still slip through the net there, but at least they were trying. At least any script kiddie out there that doesn't understand the idea behind, port security is going to probably stumble pretty hard on that until they figure it out. But so interesting. How is this going to affect your everyday user there, Don?
Well, I think your everyday user doesn't use SMB1.
Yeah.
Right. So
you're right. I don't.
But, let's say that you are supporting the waterworks, right? One of our utilities infrastructures where they've got SCAD devices that do use SMB1 and have not been updated in 40 years and whatever, right? So in those environments, you might look at it and say, well, it's okay for me to upgrade my client and it won't mess with this connection, but then it does, right?
Yeah.
And so those are the things you have to evaluate. And the reality is, if you're still using SMB1, you got to get away from that. That needs to be an objective. But you'll just have to update your firewall policies. And if you've got like Active Directory, you can do a group policy object to turn it back on. You can override Microsoft's new default. It's just a change in the default.
Tells you how you gotta keep an eye on how the changes that come down the line can affect you, and very well may.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Don said, change is a foot, which is funny because I always thought change was a leg. But we'll go ahead and move on from that. We've got.
I thought it was small coins.
All right. I see what you did there. We've got another article here in our tech segment of the podcast. This one is, I believe we're coming. Is this Slashdot? That is Slashdot. Okay, yeah. So it says ransomware immutable backups, huh? Oh, that's an ad. Oopsie. There's a giant banner at the top of my screen. All right, well, turn on my ad blocker. All right, that's not what the article's about. Canonical reveals more detail. Camera director, heart attack there.
So
He's
funny.
like, what?
It's right there on the screen, Sophie.
I can't read. This is the actual article. Canonical reveals more details about Ubuntu Core Desktop. So another topic that I don't know a whole lot about, just because, again, I'm not super familiar with Ubuntu. It's not, or is it Ubuntu?
It's technically it's Ubuntu.
Ubuntu.
That's how you're supposed to say it.
Well, we tomato.
Yeah,
that
it doesn't
thing.
matter.
Okay, gotcha. So this is, for y'all, this is probably good news.
About a month ago, we were talking about the upcoming Ubuntu release. So they do a release every 6 months, and in October is, or was a release. So it was, based on the year and the month, 23.10 is what just came out. And at the time, I mentioned, hey, this is another short-term support release. It's got some new features. And one thing they're experimenting with is a new immutable desktop. We didn't have a lot of data then. It was the kind of first release it was getting out for beta to test and so on. Well, coming in April, just a few months down the road, is the next long-term release. And that's the one you really want to pay attention to. Those are the ones that you're going to use in your workplace or on your own machine and so on. So 24.04 is the next long-term support release of Ubuntu. It is named something dumb.
Noble Numbat?
Noble Numbat. I don't know. What is a Numbat an actual thing? Usually they pick a real animal.
Yeah, I know what a wombat is, but I never heard of a Numbat.
A Numbat. Oh, it's cute. It's like a little squirrel with stripes. It's an Australian animal.
Okay.
Also known as the Noombat or the Walpurti.
All right, so it's Australian, so it's poisonous.
Probably.
And extremely
it
aggressive.
It will kill entire civilizations. Cute as hell, though.
So
it's kind of cute.
There were a lot of people wondering, is the immutable desktop, this new version of Ubuntu, it's called the Ubuntu Core Desktop, is it going to eventually become the new desktop? And so Canonical came out with a statement to kind of clarify what's going on here. So let me back up because I've used a few terms here not everybody might be familiar with. First is Ubuntu Core. So several years ago, Ubuntu decided to release a very, very stripped down version of Linux that they called Ubuntu Core. It's basically their Ubuntu operating system with everything optional removed. If it was possible to remove it, they removed it to get it down to be as slim as possible. So if you wanted a completely thin operating system that you could then just add the pieces that you need, this is where you would start.
Hence the core capabilities, basically.
Yeah. Because the more fluff you have inside of an OS, the more people like Daniel can take advantage of it. So we don't want that. So if you're building container images, Ubuntu Core, great. If you're doing IoT, Ubuntu Core, great. And you add on what you want. Well, sometimes you want a desktop environment. So you actually want a GUI, and that brings with it a lot of extra stuff. It takes a bunch of extra libraries to run a GUI. So what they did is they wanted to create an immutable desktop. This is where the root file system is read-only, so it can't be changed, right? When you're running on a Raspberry Pi, you're usually using an SD card as your media. The more writes you put to the SD card, the sooner you're going to bring it to failure. So things like just regular syslog can really kill an SD card. So immutable systems like these, instead of logging to the file system, will log to RAM. And then when you reboot them, it just goes away.
Yeah.
Or it does a single write as opposed to a whole series of writes all throughout the time the system's running. So that's what Ubuntu Core Desktop is. The slimmed down OS with a GUI and with the file system being read-only. That is being positioned for IoT. If you're starting an IoT project, this is where you want to go. And that's why they intentionally didn't put a package manager in it. They're saying, we don't want it to be easy to use. We want you to know what you're doing, to only put what you absolutely need in there and have a run at it. And then they completely made it worthless by saying, oh, and it really requires you to use snaps, which I've gone on enough about how crappy snaps are. But anyhow, so that's what Core is. And so Ubuntu or Canonical has clarified that. So you will still get a regular server, a regular desktop image, just like normal. That's not going away anytime soon, but the Core and Core Desktop distros will kind of coexist.
So if I'm running something like a Raspberry Pi, I'm probably going to reach out and grab that immutable. That's what I'm going to want.
You know, I'm not.
I'm not.
No, because
screw that.
Well, if you want to stand up, a server that you can quickly add packages to and stuff like that, that's not what this Core is going to give you.
Okay.
Now, if you are a commercial entity and you're creating something like, remember, I think we talked about this once before. Our friend Tim had this map on the wall that had LEDs.
His map for like flight pattern or like whatever airports were open or whatever.
It would show the weather status at every airport in the state of Florida. And so you could see if it was green, that was clear weather, you could land at that airport. If it was yellow, then I don't know, there was something. And then if it was red, it was like
dead bodies
storm conditions, and they were directing planes to other places. It was neat.
Yeah.
And it had a Raspberry Pi stuck on the back of the frame. That's what powered it, right? If I'm building that, I don't want a user messing with that.
Right.
I don't need it doing much other than grabbing its weather updates, which it's going to do in RAM anyway. And so there's nothing that needs to persist from one boot to another. I want Core and I want an immutable file system so that the media will last as long as possible. And I don't have to worry about the system getting tampered with. If a hacker gets into it, they can't write to the file system. They could try and operate from RAM, right? It was living off the land.
Oh, living off the land means that I use the tools that are available in the operating system.
What's it
and
called?
Not install anything.
Fileless?
Fileless.
What is it called when you don't write to the file system? You do your entire hack in RAM.
Oh, yeah, fileless.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
like a fileless malware where technically there's a lot of times there are writing files involved, but for the most part, yes, all the things are done in RAM.
Yep. And so if you're doing it in RAM and a customer calls and says, hey, your map of Florida got hacked, the vendor can just say, well, reboot it.
Yeah.
And you reboot it and it's fixed, sort of, right? Whatever vulnerability was there is still there.
Yeah.
but it's enough to get you off the phone.
Yeah. And then start standing up a firewall in front of that thing.
Yeah. So that's who it's really targeted to. So I think that your regular business user, home user, even your enterprise user is probably not going to care about Ubuntu Core. But if you're a device manufacturer, especially with IoT, that's where this comes into play.
Does Ubuntu or Canonical make an embedded system?
That's really what this would be.
This is what this is for them.
They describe it as for IoT, embedded, and edge devices.
Gotcha. Okay, well, cool. It's nice to have another player in the market then. See how that goes.
We'll see how it goes because the others have never really consolidated.
And the problem isn't necessarily the operating systems themselves. You know, they might run just fine. It's the implementation of the system and how they set it up and whether or not they did anything secure. Right. And they just went, oh, I need an operating system. Let me grab this embedded Linux, throw that on there. Yeah, it's MIPS or whatever ARM based or whatever chipset you're using. And then off they go. And a lot of times they just compile that with whatever BusyBox tools they want so that they have the things that they need to make the system run. But Sophia can tell us we played around with that stuff, and we were able to modify these things, weren't we?
We did, yeah. Well, by we, I mean you, and I watched and I laughed as you destroyed things. So
maniacally. She laughed maniacally.
Yeah, it was quite fun.
Yeah.
It was fun to be a witness to it because I didn't, you were having to like figure out how to get in there, and I just got to watch the chaos.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Can I be totally honest? I'm still looking at the page for the Numbats. I'm still looking at the pictures and stuff. They got
They're
these
that cute. You've been
They're kind of cute,
in.
but they've got these long, like venom type tongues because they're like anteaters.
Turn it this way. I can't see it.
They're like anteaters. Maybe Christian can find a picture and put it up there. I'm
Numbat.
not sure.
Oh,
'Cause I don't know if it won't
interesting.
show if I turn it to the
are
camera.
Are they poisonous? It
Absolutely.
is Australia.
No, they-
It's like a over 50% chance.
I don't believe they are, but they do eat right around 20,000 termites a day. So
Wow.
I thought that was interesting, and they use their tongues to get down into
so
the termite
they're
mounds.
like a little aardvark.
Yeah, they are. There's another name for them: banded anteater. So
Okay.
I know that's not tech news, but I told you we were going off the beaten path today.
That's
Yeah.
right. We do what we want.
We do what we want. Now that's actually not what I was talking about when I said that. I was talking about our next article, which I'm sure Don and Daniel are very excited about. And I am too, but I really feel like this holds a special place in their hearts. So this comes to us from Ars Technica. New York falls under a spectral death chill in Ghostbusters Frozen Empire teaser. The last thing you see is your own tear ducts freezing up. That's probably not how that was meant to be read. But yes, so new trailer for yet another Ghostbusters movie. And I guess this is a follow-up to the one a couple years ago with the new McKenna Grace girl.
Afterlife.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So, obviously we're a tech podcast and we usually talk about tech news, but Ghostbusters does hold a special place in our hearts here at Technado.
I hope you can tell. Behind Sophia is Vigo the Carpathian from Ghostbusters 2. Hello.
You can see him from the waist down, I guess.
Yeah.
He looks like he's power standing, like he's man spreading.
Oh, look, hey, Christian.
No way.
Christian's got
There
us
we
covered.
go.
So.
There he is. Viggy,
Wow.
Viggy,
Yeah.
Viggy.
Yep, that was a birthday present from my wife several years ago of a life-size reproduction of that. And behind Daniel, we've got, the
Ghostbusters?
Stay Puffed
Yep.
and
It's
other
true.
Ghostbusters. So it's just, there it is.
Oh, this
There we go.
is wow.
So, Ghostbusters is a, just a franchise that we celebrate. And,
We
and
do
they've,
love it.
they've
We do
had
love
some
it.
missteps, but anytime there's a new Ghostbusters movie, I think we just have to talk about it. What did you think? Did you guys both see the last one? Did you both see
Yes,
Afterlife?
I did.
And what did you guys think?
I thought it was good. Let me put it there. I'm gonna start there with my official stance on Ghostbusters Afterlife was good. I made the mistake of watching the Red Letter Media review of it, which was hysterical. And they point out some valid inconsistencies or missteps that they could have done better. But I think overall it was a good movie. It had just enough nostalgia with just enough like new stuff and to really push the franchise forward, I think. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do next. I really want to see a new storyline, and this definitely looks like we're getting a new storyline.
Yep. What did you think, Sophie?
I enjoyed it, and I'll be honest, I kind of just went because my mom was like, "What's in the theater? Let's just find something to see," and we ended up seeing that. And
Have you seen the other two Ghostbusters or three?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
I know,
Outed.
I know.
Outed.
I was gonna get to that. That was coming.
Sure you were.
But I even
Like Maine is getting to things. Spoiler alert.
despite the fact that no, I'm not intimately familiar with the lore of the originals, other than Bill Murray is in them. I do know that. I did still like it. It was still a fun movie to watch, and I think McKenna Grace is a great actor, and I thought that the casting was pretty good. So I mean, I enjoyed it.
I
but
think
yeah,
that's how you know it was a pretty decent flick, was like someone who has never seen the other movies can watch this movie and go, hey, this is pretty good. And you can jump in and kind of figure out what's going on.
right? Because I did see a lot of stuff that was like, oh, there's so
Right.
much fan service in this reboot, and I'm thinking like, I don't even know because
Right.
I never saw the other than I think well, spoilers, I guess, for Afterlife. They
been a
come
while.
back and they're ghosts or whatever. The original Ghostbusters like
Yeah.
help them fight off the whatever.
Yeah. One
So-
of them is a ghost.
One of them's ghost. I'm sorry. I
Because
don't.
in real life, he is dead.
Okay. Well, yeah. There you go. See, it's been so
they
long.
had to CG
I
ghost
just,
him.
Yeah.
But-
even as somebody that
But
doesn't know.
here's what's up, though, is I'm the kind of person is like, I hate when all they do is prey on my nostalgia
Yeah.
to make a movie. And is there nostalgia in this? Yes. But I also have to understand that, like, there are people like Sophia who do not have that. So they have to kind of reach and get both audiences, where get somebody who loves the franchise because they loved it when they were a kid, and also get the new kids and make them love it as well. and bridge that gap. So I thought they did a pretty good job with that.
And to me, that was the problem with the movie that came out in 2016 was instead of doing a sequel, they did a reboot.
Right. Wrong.
And they changed things like, all right, a proton pack's not good enough. Now you have to have a proton puncher.
Oh,
and and stuff like that. It's just like really, instead of a firehouse, it's a Chinese restaurant. And like, and those were changes that didn't add anything. They were annoying.
Right. It was change for change's sake.
But the biggest crime to me was, I don't know if you guys follow Leslie Jones, but she is like one of the funniest people on the entire planet.
Man.
And they minimized her camera time and gave her garbage lines. Like they should have just turned her loose, like they did with Bill Murray, and said, "All right, Leslie, you do what you want.
You do you, and we're just gonna film it."
And it would have been awesome. Yeah, but just like set up for failure.
Yeah.
I never saw that one. I never saw the one.
You know what I blame on that is that's just studio. The studio going, we have to make X amount of dollars, and this is safe. Right, we can punch this into a formula and make X amount of dollars, and that's all we really care about. That's what I hate about. I was listening to somebody talk about how at Disney, if you come up with a new idea for like a film or something like that, they don't call it a new idea; they call it an unproven plot or something like that. An unproven idea, because it is yet to make us money. And only if you can make us some money with it will this get greenlit. So you have to prove that it can be a working idea that will make us money.
So as you guys saw all of the original ones, obviously, and I would like to point out the first Ghostbusters came out almost 40 years ago. Yeah. So there's that for you. But because you
I was there.
You were there. Yeah, you remember. But because you guys obviously grew up with these originals and I'm assuming have probably seen every piece of Ghostbusters material there is, this article talks about the trailer for the new movie, right?
Yes. And I had no idea a new movie was coming out, so I was surprised when the trailer dropped. And I do follow this stuff, so I'm surprised I missed it. But before I hit play, there was that moment of trepidation, like, is this going to be another reboot, or are they going to try and run with it? And they decided to run with it. You know, they got Paul Rudd and all, and granted, every Ant-Man movie has totally sucked, but at least he can, do some things right. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm excited about it. It is supposed to be releasing next year, right? 2024.
Is that one? Yeah.
I didn't see the release date now, but yeah, we'll have to report on it. Maybe we'll film a Technado episode from the theater and see how long it takes us to get kicked out.
It hits theaters on March 29th, 2024.
Oh yeah, just a cool 4 months away.
Yeah.
What is there's a YouTube channel or something that y'all watch where is it Riff Tracks?
Oh, Riff Tracks?
Yeah. So y'all are going to do a Riff Tracks Technado from watching Ghostbusters?
We can't riff this immediately. We got to watch it first and enjoy it.
Gotcha.
Or not enjoy it. Especially if we don't enjoy it, then yes, it is riffed. We will riff the mess out of this thing. Okay. And that will be fun.
Well, I will look forward to that.
Oh, man. I was watching Christmas commercials from the 70s and 80s with my kids, and I just started riffing them. And my oldest daughter, was dying. She was like, "Stop! You have to stop! I can't read." Like they're eating these Christmas candies. I'm like, it's poison. Oh man, it is fun to make my kids laugh.
Yeah.
It's the greatest joy in life, I would imagine. Is. Yeah. I don't have kids, so I can't relate. But yeah, I would imagine.
Wait, but you're a grandpa.
Yeah.
I don't have kids. I've got grandkids.
Oh,
all right.
She doesn't have kids. She has your kids.
Is that possible?
All right. Well,
if you ever want to see them again.
So yeah, like we've said, we've got a couple different perspectives on this here because I've seen that reboot, never saw the originals. They've seen obviously everything that's ever been released ever that has anything to do with Ghostbusters. So I'm curious to know what y'all think about what y'all thought about Afterlife. If you thought it did the series justice, if you enjoyed it, if you thought it was crap, be nice. And what you think about this new trailer, if you're looking forward to it or if you're, apprehensive.
Or if you're ready for us to shut up about Ghostbusters.
Cautious optimism, yeah.
Here's the thing. That's never going to happen.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, we will go ahead and take a quick break then. So, yeah, I appreciate if y'all leave a comment down below. Let us know what you think about this new Ghostbusters movie or any of the other news we've talked about in this first half of Technado. But we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with more security news. Tired of trying to schedule your team's time around in-person learning? Isn't it a bummer to spend thousands of dollars on travel for professional development? What if we said you can save money and time and still provide your team with the best training possible? The answer to your woes is live online training from ACI Learning. With live online training, we provide our top in-person courses in private, online, instructor-led formats. You get to provide professional development in a manner that fits today's expectations. Entertaining, convenient, and effective. Our exam-aligned courses inspire the full potential of your team. Visit virtual instructor-led training at ACI Learning for more info. Welcome back to Technado. Thanks for sticking with us through that break. And if you are still here, even through that egregious mouth typo, we would love it if you would subscribe to the channel so that you never miss an episode of Technado in the future, whether you are watching on YouTube or listening on a podcast platform like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We love having you here and joining us for these conversations. We'll go ahead. They're looking at me like I'm crazy.
Isn't
so
there
I'm wondering,
like a technical term in the biz for when you make like a mistake
stuttered.
in speaking?
I couldn't think
like
of
a
the
whisker
word.
or a whisper or something like that, and they called that
Something like that. I couldn't think of the word, so I said mouth typo, and I'm probably going to get
mouth typo.
I'm going to get
I like that better.
hate for that. Yeah, they're going to be in the comments, actually.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I'm sure there is a word for it. Anyway, we'll go ahead and move on. They're looking at me like I'm crazy. So we'll jump into our security news in this half of Technado. This first article is part of a segment called Who Got Pwned?
Looks like you're about to get pwned.
Fatality.
Yeah!
So this article comes to us from TechCrunch. Maine government says data breach affects 1.3 million people. So obviously this in and of itself is, big yikes. But as I understand it, there's an additional part to this story that they didn't do a great job of telling people about this breach. Is that right?
Right, and I would say it's not so much that they didn't do a great job, is that they didn't do a job. They were stucky or whatever word we invented a minute ago.
Sticking with us.
So 1.3 million people, which if you're not familiar with the state of Maine, you shouldn't be too embarrassed because it's up there, right? It's practically Canada. But 1.3 million people, a.k.a. everyone in Maine.
So Don.
Their population is
1.372 million.
Yeah.
Huh.
So basically, one of the state computer systems got compromised with, by attackers, by outside malicious actors, and they were able to access personal information on every resident of Maine. So if you are a local resident and a Mainer, right, which I'm telling you guys, my whole life, I was told that if you were from Maine, you were called a maniac, which I thought was hilarious and turns out not to be true.
No, you are a Mainer.
Yeah.
If you are from Maine. So there's a town close to us called Melrose, right? It's a little town, right? If you're from there, you're called a Melroid.
A Melroid.
Yeah.
I hit the mic.
Treat that.
I hit the mic. We started a cascading effect.
That sounds like an insult from like an 80s high school bully.
Yeah.
Like a Melroid.
Yeah, what are you, a Melroid?
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry.
Technically,
I'm sorry.
yes. Oh, and this is why I'm getting beat up. Okay.
And they sell more Preparation H per capita than anywhere else in Florida.
Exactly.
All right. Well, so Maine had a breach. That's exciting, right? But not really news. All the residents of Maine got their PII compromised. That's exciting, but again, not really news. This kind of happened. This is yet another breach caused by the MoveIt vulnerability, that mass hack that has been, we've been reporting on this for months and months at this point. So again, not really news.
Yeah.
So
what was it, Clop that hit the MoveIt?
Is Clop the group or the attack? I mixed that one up.
I want to say Clop is the ransom group.
Here it is. Yeah, the Clop gang.
Yeah.
And Microsoft just put out an announcement on Clop, which that's another one. Like, what a terrible name.
Like
they must not have picked that name themselves.
I mean, come on. The joke is sitting right there. You just have to you're thinking it right now. I know you are.
Maine got the Clop.
Got the Clop.
Yep.
Wow. Wow.
So you might be wondering at this point where the news is. Which,
I want to know where they got the Clop.
We wonder sometimes. But what's news here is that Maine, while this is a well-published attack, that they knew their system got hit, they did not notify people for 6 months. And you have to wonder, like, what is responsible disclosure for a breach? According to GDPR, it's 72 hours, 3 days. Right now, Maine, last I checked, not in the EU, but it's a progressive world. Maybe they could get in there. But they're not in the EU, so GDPR doesn't apply. The U.S. doesn't have effective data privacy laws. So
what about the California Privacy Act or whatever it is that is basically like a Californian version of GDPR?
Yeah.
If you want to do business or have websites that Californians can access, but maybe that doesn't apply because their site isn't really, because it's a state-run site, maybe?
Right. And it's a state-run site for Maine's
Mainers.
Department of Health and Human Services. So no California citizens
Right.
should
So
be
they
in
got
that
they
system.
got nothing guiding them on this thing.
Right. And so they were really just left to their own judgment. And in their judgment, they needed time to find out what all was accessed and make sure they were actually hacked and they wanted to make sure they had patched and closed off the vulnerability prior to notifying. And so that means 6 months for them. This is not a good look for Maine's IT department.
Yeah, I would really love to have been in one of those meetings and just raise my hand ever so slowly and go, I have a question. Why aren't we telling anybody about this again? Like, what is the purpose of not telling them? It's a very well documented thing that Klopp has done this to multiple different. You're a government. It's not like they're going to come and cancel you, right? It's not like like someone's going to come in and go, oh, you've done so horrible at your IT. Everyone's going to jail and we're shutting the state of Maine down. That's not going to occur.
And your revenue is not going to go down.
Right. Things, it's just business as usual. So why don't you just go, hey, everybody, here's the thing, man. That Klopp business got us, man. Move it sucked. And we're moving on. We're fixing it. Everything's going on. And just let people know, because what ends up happening with this information that gets basically stolen by these ransomware gangs? Well, they use it to do like identity theft and whatnot. They can sell that information to people that want to do identity theft. And when you look at all the information that got stolen from them, names, social security, like everything, PII, it was like, oh man, this is the PII nightmare right here. That would be the worst case scenario. You would want to tell them sooner than later so they can put holds on their credit and do all the things necessary to like start to protect themselves. So yeah, like you said, this is not a good look for the state of Maine.
All right, so let's make this worse, because their attorney general released a statement saying that 1.3 million does not match up to the state's population, and that only 40% of the people affected are actually state residents. And so that means they did have information on people out of state, likely because their Department of Education was impacted. So they probably had out-of-state people in school, or at least school records. You know, they had been a resident in the past and moved, but also because of the health system. You know, there must have been people out of state in the health system, which makes sense. Like here in Florida, we have a ton of that. So,
I just did a Google search of what is the population of Maine, and it says 1.372 million as of 2021. So maybe there's a few other people here, but for the most part, that's kind of lining up. I don't understand how it's definitely more than 40%.
But what he's saying is that in this data breach, of the 1.3 million affected, over half of them were not state residents.
Were not state residents.
So that means not 100% of Mainers were impacted. But that makes it just worse.
Right,
like
because
you're not notifying
you
people.
Didn't tell those people. They're not even part of your state. Like you should have been disclosing.
Yep. So I think this is another sign of, I'm not a big fan of big government. I don't like the idea of new regulation and stuff. But when you see a state organization like this just not act in the best interest of their people, it's really frustrating. It makes you think, hey, maybe we need to have some kind of federal level, here's your notification window.
Yeah, but this is okay. So I'm with you, right? I don't like big government getting their hands on let industries regulate themselves, like the PCI DSS, right? That is not a government-backed standard, right? That is payment. People that take payment cards say, we are going to play this game. This is how security is done. And if you don't play the game with us, we will not do business with you. So it self-regulates. This is a government entity. You can regulate the piss out of yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't care. Like, go crazy. There absolutely should be higher standards for our government and state-run facilities for their IT and security because of that, because of how much sensitive information they deal with and the fallout behind them getting a breach. I mean, come on, man.
I would think that the regulations would almost need to be a little stricter than they would be for private businesses, just because of the nature of the information you might be dealing with.
Right.
And I'm never one to give more credit than is due to a government institution.
Well, as we can see, they kind of mess things up
Yes,
Right?
yes.
They take forever to do anything, as we see here. We're 6
They
months
were playing
later.
solitaire. All right, give them a second. But
Cross every T and dot every lowercase J.
but they did. I guess they've got a whole website dedicated to it now. So if you want information on the breach, you can go to maine.gov/moveitglobal such and such. It's in one of the articles. You could just Google it. Just Google it if you live in Maine. Probably don't.
If anything needs oversight, it's the damned government.
Yeah.
Like, right?
And they've got now a dedicated call center to this issue with representatives available from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday to Friday, which is longer than most government hours. And they're also offering 2 years of complimentary credit monitoring and identity theft protection services to people whose security numbers and taxpayer identification numbers.
That makes everything better.
Oh, man.
Never mind.
That fixes the
Man,
problem.
you just washed away all my fears.
Yeah,
and forgiveness is yours.
Once you have that credit monitoring, you're golden.
Yeah.
Identity theft protection services. Well, I for one feel so safe, but I'm not a resident of Maine, so that would explain it. We'll go ahead and move on.
You know what the Mainers should do? They should just go out and start taking out massive amounts of debt and credit and then be like, hey, must have been them clop bastards. I didn't do that. Where's my stuff? Pay it back. It's not me.
Yeah.
We could probably
Where'd
do
you
this
get that
all
boat?
day.
Yeah, it fell off a truck.
We could definitely do this all day. So we'll jump to our next article.
By the way, you shouldn't do that. Don't steal.
No, that's fraud.
That was a joke.
Give the disclaimer. Yeah,
Yeah.
you shouldn't kill people. You shouldn't steal.
right.
As you,
I
you
hate
always
that I
have
have to tell you that you're not supposed to like do bad things.
Yeah, but you do.
But you do.
You do.
Otherwise, someone go, well, Daniel said I could do it.
You're the moral compass for our viewers, Dan. We look to you for guidance.
As you should.
Oh, gosh.
Not do.
We. Yeah, I was going to say the general we. So this article comes to us from time.com, Time Magazine, the website.
I know,
Anyway,
it's somehow
The
still
website.
relevant.
somehow still relevant, yes. It says cyber attack forces world's biggest bank to trade via USB stick. And I will confess, I had to skim the article. I wasn't able to read it in depth. But it seems to me like every time that I've ever heard a USB stick talked about in this office, it's always like, don't touch it. Like if you find a USB stick or if you're
Like it's
using it,
plutonium.
like you have to be so careful with what you're plugging into your computer. So when I hear the world's biggest bank is trading via USB stick, for some reason that sets off alarm bells, and maybe I'm wrong in thinking that.
So that's not what's going on here because it was their own USB stick. So what's really interesting about this one? Hey, if we did a news article and we said such and such bank gets hit by ransomware, is that really news at this point? Like that happens all the time. And
that's a day that ends in Y. Right?
Yeah. Ransomware gang holds banks data hostage, whatever. That's all pretty normal. In this case, a very, very large bank got hit. They were not able to process treasury trades because their systems were offline. And so what they had to do was manually put their trade operations onto a USB key and have a courier drive them over to the treasury to Fed to actually have them process those transactions. So that's what they mean by they had to trade via USB key. So the USB key, I'm going to assume that they encrypted it and protected it, and the courier was actually an employee and not like Uber Eats. but who knows these days, right? It's the Wild West.
Yeah,
so
bring me Jimmy John's and the USB stick.
So I'm just gonna assume all that's the case. What's really interesting here to me, because all that other stuff that's sadly pretty normal these days.
Yeah.
What's really interesting here to me is that the bank itself was the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China. So this is a Chinese-owned bank, a state-run bank, and it has a U.S. arm or a unit that's over here in the U.S. that does business with, our Department of Treasury and the Fed and individual commercial entities.
Are we on good terms with CCP?
I don't think we're on good terms with them, but we use the hell out of their money.
We sure do. That seems weird. Like, man, I really don't like you, but can you hold my money for me? That'd be great.
Yeah. Yep. So, when there's a ransomware attack here in the U.S., there is just a default reaction of it was the Russians or it was the Chinese, right? Chinese hackers are always after us. The Russian hackers are always after us.
Don't forget North Korea.
And sometimes North Korea, yeah. And hey, sometimes it's true, right? Like this stuff is actually coming from those countries.
It's a lot.
So that's where it's unusual to see a state, like a Chinese state-owned bank, get hit by one of these attacks.
Yeah. Well, especially since, and I read this in the article as well, but yeah, I've heard it before that normally when you get hit by ransomware, right, what do the attackers ask for? They ask for money in the form of a cryptocurrency. But if I'm not mistaken, in China, cryptocurrency is illegal. Like they have banned cryptocurrency, so they can't use it. So that's why, and a lot of times we don't see Chinese industry get hit by ransomware as much because they don't have the cryptocurrency to pay them. So it's like, well, why? Now that does beg the question. Now that I'm thinking of it, what do I give a crap if I'm an attacker? I'd be like, you better go get some, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Because I want my Bitcoin if you want this back.
Well, and the other part that makes this more complex is while the U.S. and Chinese relations aren't great, Chinese and Russian relations are great. Like they're buddy buddy.
Yeah.
They both have the same type of government in place.
Yeah, part of the BRICS system that are trying to make the Chinese yuan the oil reserve currency.
Yeah. Yep. So
which would crash the U.S. dollar, by the way.
Yeah. Well, this is the way that nations work, right?
Welcome to world economy.
So you would think that if a state-run Chinese bank was hit, they're saying here that it's Lockbit, which is a Russian hacking group, was hit by a Russian hacking group, and as we allege that hacking group is Russian state-run, that somebody in the Chinese government would contact somebody in the Russian government and say, hey, can you give us a pass on this?
Yeah.
And if Lockbit is a state-run hacking group, then they would, give them a pass.
Yeah.
But that has not happened. And so this bank has been completely disrupted, and it seems odd.
It does.
And I'd really love to know what's going on behind the scenes. This could be a matter of like a distraction. Like, hey, every now and then we have to hit one of our own targets so people don't think it's state-run.
We got to sacrifice a pawn, right?
But this does make it seem like it is not a state-run hacking group like we've alleged.
Well, and I do know a lot of times you'll see like those hacking groups kind of break apart a bit, and people in those groups will go off and form their own group, and they're not necessarily a part of that state-run facility anymore. They might be just their own. They're like, hey, we're really good at this ransomware thing. Let's go do our own. We get all that money. I gotta worry about being beheld to the state when I can just go make money and have a Lambo or whatever and enjoy myself. So they'd be like, well, what do we know? Well, we do know how to get into that Chinese system. That's true. They got a lot of money. So who knows what's going on? This is all speculation, of course, but who knows what's going on back there? And even a lot of times you'll see them take their code, and then some of it will become like open sourced on the dark web, and they'll sell things as an open source thing, or not open source. Obviously, they're getting selling it, or they're just freely making it available, and then people take it and modify it and use it, and it looks like the same code because in a lot of ways it is. So how do you give attribution? We start looking at the ransomware itself and doing analysis of it. And it's like, oh, it's sharing code with Lockbit, so it must be Lockbit, but not necessarily. It's just probably, maybe, because we're seeing the same code base in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think for us, we do need to look at any kind of attribution like that with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And I had talked to one of the engineers at Okta years ago, and he was telling me how a lot of attacking or malicious malware groups, whatever, they would try and set it up for false attribution. So they would put some Russian text in there, even though they weren't Russian. Yeah. And then other people would see it like, oh, nope, this is Russia. It's got Russian text in here. It must be them.
Yeah. A lot of times they will want to get the wrong person attributed to the attack by putting in that fake code, or they'll find open source code, or they'll reverse engineer code of other malware and then use that code base in their own malware and then go, haha, now you'll think it's Russia. So I wonder, I can't wait to see the end game on this, even if we ever get to see the end game on this.
I seriously doubt we will.
I seriously doubt we will, though. Yeah.
Didn't we just talk about last week another issue with a big bank? There was some like data center that there was a bunch of transactions that got thwarted or something.
The one that overheated?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I feel like I'm having deja vu here. We're talking about banks are screwing things up all the time.
Yeah, the thing that's different on this one, because all that stuff, not news, right?
Yeah.
The thing is different is that this one impacted China.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And
the world's largest bank.
Right.
That's like a big deal. And it's kind of funny that they were using SneakerNet to continue doing financial transactions.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll put it on this USB stick and give it to the Jimmy John's driver. Hey, could you run over to 4th and,
they
whatever, and
fast.
Bleecker and pass this off to my man, whatever his name is. And
okay.
Yeah.
That's just kind of funny.
That's funny. Sounds like
the irony
not
of
super funny.
of the world's largest and most sophisticated banking systems that are just passing USB is ironic.
Yeah.
And funny.
It's funny, but like in a nervous laughter kind of
Right,
way.
like, please
Yeah.
fix this.
All right. Well,
Joke's over.
well, speaking of fixing things, we'll go ahead and jump to our next article. This comes to us from the Hacker News. CISA, I've heard it pronounced both ways, sets a deadline, CISA, sets a deadline, patch Juniper JunOS OS flaws before November 17th. I also thought this was pronounced JunOS until we did a course on it, and then it's actually JunOS, apparently.
Yep.
I've been corrected. So there's, I think, 5 vulnerabilities that are now in the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, and they all have the exact same score, don't they?
They do. Yeah, this is an interesting one because, if you just read about it, it sounds super significant. This is Juniper. And if you're not familiar with Juniper, right, when people think routers and switches, Cisco is usually who pops into mind, right? And when you go into a lot of enterprises and businesses, you'll see Cisco hardware. But when you go to ISPs, you're actually more likely to see Juniper hardware. Juniper has done a phenomenal job with really high-end routers. I'm talking about the routers that start at like $100,000 and more, the really expensive ones. So internet service providers rely on this. A lot of core infrastructure that powers the internet comes from Juniper. So very robust, well-tested, reliable hardware and software. They're neat equipment. I like working on their devices. So when you hear about significant vulnerabilities in Juniper hardware, I immediately think, wow, this is an infrastructure level attack. This could be something that takes down internet backbones, that kind of level of attack. But then when you look at the CVEs, there were 5 CVEs, and they're all rated a 5.3. I'm like, 5.3? That's like...
Don doesn't get out of bed for anything less than a 7.
I know. That's 5.3 is like the screensaver set with a 6-minute timeout instead of 5 minutes. Like, why worry about that? So Daniel, you had an interesting perspective on this, and I wanted you to talk about it a little bit. Like, why do we care about this?
Sure. So why this is important and why CISA has set out an advisory for you to, if you are running JunOS, to start patching, do what you're supposed to do, get that security fixed and updates going, is because, yes, while each one of these vulnerabilities seem to be relatively innocuous, they are exploitable. And what's interesting is, if you're new to security, you probably don't. I remember when I was on David Bomble's podcast, right? And he had me show like a bunch of hacking techniques. Show me some hacking stuff, Daniel. Show me this and show me that. I was like, okay, cool. And I'm showing him things like SQL injection, and I'm showing him things like what else did I do? I don't know, maybe like an IDOR or something. And he's like, oh, this is taking forever, Daniel. This is when we were like pre-gaming and make sure everything was going to work for his demonstration. He's like, where is the sizzle? Well, I want to see you click and hack. I go, yeah, that does happen, but it's rare. Normally, you have to figure things out and go, okay, well, I can use this. And then due to that, I can bounce over here. And once I get there, I should be able to grab this piece of information. With that information, I'm now able to, and now I can point, click, and hack my way to it. So hacking, while it does occur where you do have point, click, hack, that does happen. A lot of times you're chaining exploits together to the end game, which is having remote code execution on your target systems, right? That is what we are seeing here. So you take these 5 threes, you chain them together in the right way, and now you're able to upload a PHP web shell on the device and access that and execute any arbitrary command that you wish. That's bad. And that gives it a 9.8 when you put these together. So if you look at that actual advisory from CISA, you'll see that it talks about it's adding these 6 known exploited vulnerabilities to that. And it's because if you chain them together, you could compromise the system completely, making it a 9.8. So very, very, very bad. And which is unfortunately, like how I want to say that these are new, right? All of these kind of came out recently, within the last couple of weeks or so, right?
Actually, I mean, so I when I had grabbed this article, it was 5 exploits. Now it's up to 6.
Now it's up to 6.
And they just updated it 2 days ago. So this is live.
Yeah. So fun. It gets scarier by the day. I can't wait. Maybe tomorrow it'll be 7 or 8. Who knows? It's like Christmas.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. It's great.
It's like Christmas, but inside your box is like a bomb.
It's like Gremlins, and somebody keeps spilling water on it.
Yes. Who the hell is with the water around here? No more water in this building. Okay. Only Yoo-hoos and energy drinks.
Wow.
But yeah, that's the problem. You chain these exploits together, and now you have full compromise.
Mm.
And it is actively happening.
I'm sorry, you've now set my mind spiraling, and I'm wondering, like, if you spill a Yoo-hoo on a gremlin, does it
What
reproduce?
happens?
And it's got water in it,
It
sure,
does.
but it's not.
But it's not water per se.
It just halfway reproduces, and it's like a conjoined
Yeah,
twin
it's
gremlin.
like horrible monstrosity. That's even worse than the gremlin itself. Yeah, the old Chinese man did not tell me about the Yoo-hoo clause in owning a Mogwai.
That's the unspeakable rule.
So, I mean, I didn't think I had to tell you. It's so bad.
All right, so
That 6 vulnerability, I'm just curious, does it have the same score as the other 5?
Good question.
I don't know. I haven't had a chance to look at it, and it's
1, 2,
I
3,
have to figure out which
It's-
one's the
I-
new
yeah,
one.
I know
I
we
gotta
just-
figure out which one it is.
It's brand new, so
Is
who
it
knows?
the sysaid one that they added? It's
no.
47246.
7.
Yep, that's the one they added.
2,
Okay.
4, 6.
Or I wonder if that's maybe the root.
That is the 9.8. That is the accumulator.
That's the one that pushes it over.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Okay.
so maybe it's that they didn't necessarily add one. Is that they
Is
rolled
the-
them all
rolled them
together
as
to get to
one
that
big
9.8.
attack. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, okay.
Well, I think the lesson to be had here is that much like spilling water on a Mogwai, we can't ignore some of the lower scores. When we see these like 5.3 scores that by themselves, you might look at it and like me, just kind of discount it out of hand. But if it's getting chained together with other things, all you have to do is break that chain at one point. So here's 5.3s. If I just fix one of them, that whole chain is broken. There's probably other chains, right? But that breaks it. So we need to be addressing these even though they have a lower vulnerability score.
Yeah. And it's as simple as update. Just update your
Usually,
stuff,
yeah.
right?
Usually it's just an update.
I mean, Don, you've worked in, and so have I, right? We've worked. When I got updates, I would get like security and critical updates for Microsoft stuff almost every day, if not every day, right? It wasn't like that stuff just hung around and we waited until Patch Tuesday to throw it out there.
Yeah.
What is up with the fact that, I'm not even talking about like, there's a lot of organizations out there with just no scheduled patching cycle, no test, no nothing. They just kind of willy-nilly go, we'll get to it.
So, I worked at a bank.
Yeah.
And we were FDIC insured. So we had a lot of SLAs that we had to hit and maintain. So we did not just roll out updates willy-nilly. Right. So we had a policy. And for desktop updates, it was pretty fast. So when an update came out, it was immediately rolled out to our test group. Our test group was like 20 people. It included the IT desktop support people, and it included some people out in some branch offices. So they rolled out immediately.
Did you have like test servers as well that had
servers were a different policy?
Right.
So on the desktops, we had to go faster than on the servers.
Right.
And so desktops, we would do an immediate rollout. And then it was 3-day, there was an expansion to a bigger pool of 80 users.
Gotcha.
And then at 7 days, it rolled out to the whole organization.
Yeah.
For servers, it was different. There was no immediate rollout. We actually had a whole test environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so the updates would immediately go in the test environment, and they had to run for 7 days before we could approve it and then move it into production.
And did you have test users that access those test servers to make sure everything? Yeah.
And a ton of automated testing.
Yeah, we did the same thing.
Yep. So, but here's the thing. That means like when there's a 0 day and Microsoft pushes a fix out, we weren't rolling it out for 7 days. So it would not hit our production system for 7 days. So a 0 day for us could be a 7 day, and it would still be effective. But we didn't have a choice because a lot of these updates would break stuff. And Microsoft used to be really bad about that.
They were super sucky at that stuff.
And they've gotten better, but with third-party software and all, it's still there. You'd rush an update out, and it would protect you from a security vulnerability, but then the software would stop working.
Yeah.
And so that's the battle. Even if you have a good policy.
But at least you had something in place that said, here's what we do. But here are the policies that we have in place for doing scheduled maintenance and backup and all the stuff that goes along with performing updates. I've talked to many pen testers, and they're like, do you know if most people were just doing like regularly scheduled updates, we would not get in half the time.
Yeah.
Right. They're just not updating their systems. It's not that, that we updated and it broke it and we had to roll back. It was, we just didn't do that.
And this is where I get kind of frustrated with responsible disclosure, though, is, usually like Daniel, if you discovered a 0 day and you went to a company and reported it, you'd give them, it's 90 days, right?
90 days.
It's not a rule.
That's the gentleman's agreement. Yes.
So you give them 90 days. And if they fix it in 90 days, wonderful. You promise not to disclose it until they've got to fix this out there. But if they hit 90 days and they still haven't fixed it, shame on them.
I put it in the wild.
It goes in the wild. Now it's going to get exploited, and that's going to force them to fix it. Now, for me, I always got frustrated because if that company waited until like day 89 to patch it,
Right.
Okay, you waited, and now you're ready to do disclosure. There's no time there for companies to apply the patch. It goes in the wild. This patch just came to me yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I can't put that on my production systems yet. So it's an interesting gentleman's agreement, but it doesnof really do us the best service, I think.
So yeah, there's obviously it's not perfect. It's like, don't get me wrong. But and as you see, how many of these articles have we seen where 0 days are found by security researchers, and they don't say this is actively being exploited in the wild. They just say a researcher discovered this, responsibly disclosed it, and now there's a patch available since the organization has determined that that is an actual vulnerability. They developed a working, good patch for it. You should be good to go. That happens most of the time, right? It's rare that it's like, oh, I discovered a new vulnerability as a security researcher, and I also discovered a lot of people are already getting popped by it, right? That's the nightmare scenario. And that does not happen as often as that. If I'm a security researcher, I discover a problem. We have all this time. And honeypots, if it is starting to get actively exploited, that junk will be hitting the news pretty quickly.
And in this case, Juniper did come out on November 8th.
Yeah.
And they said they do have evidence that this is actively being exploited in the wild. Yeah.
Right.
So it does happen.
Yeah, because all this stuff came out in like August.
Yeah.
Right?
You've had time to
you've had time to test with this stuff and get it implemented. And yet we still have people that are dragging their heels on this.
Yeah.
I don't get it, honestly.
Well, the clock is ticking on this one because, as the article said, they did set forth the deadline of November 17th, which, if you are watching this live, that is tomorrow. So they've got to have it fixed by the end of the week, or I don't know what the consequence would be for them.
I don't know that there is any.
What is the, it's just like, you better fix it, or we're going to be mad at you.
So CISA puts it out there that, this is where we're missing the boat on it, is this is for federal employees and computer systems. They must, by the end of this week, have this patched. So if any federal system uses JunOS and has not patched these things,
I'm sure plenty do.
They will see sanctions from the federal government because they're sanctioning themselves by saying, you will do this or you'll get in trouble. You'll be whatever.
You'll be whatevered.
Now, Joe Schmo out there that's running JunOS, they got no recourse on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess then if you don't patch it, it's kind of, you're only hurting yourself, right?
Correct.
If you don't. So at that point, the consequences just,
you
bring them on yourself.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
So there are consequences to it. That is good to know. So yeah, if you're, I guess, if you're watching this and that applies to you.
Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Yeah. If you're watching this and that applies to you, you've got till tomorrow.
FAFO.
Or,
right?
My mom's going to get a kick out of that one if she watches this. She'll love that. Well, we do appreciate y'all joining us for this conversation. Before we go, though, I do want to mention our sponsor once again, ACI Learning, the people behind IT Pro. Of course, we love that they are able to sponsor this podcast for us. And that's what we do in our day jobs. We teach those courses or host those courses, and we have a lot of fun doing it. If you are still wondering about Juniper, if that was unfamiliar to you before this episode, we actually have a whole course on it. So just a quick little plug for that. And then we've also got webinars and live on social events available on our YouTube channel. We've got one coming up the day that this episode is released. It's going to be about AI and education, I believe. So that'll be 2 o'clock on Thursday the 16th, so check that one out. And we've got one coming up at the end of the month with Bo Bullock as well. Am I pronouncing that right, Bo Bullock?
Yeah, Bo Bullock.
And Daniel Lowry, of course, is going to be hosting, and we know how much you love to see his sometimes smiling face on your screen. So check that out as well. That's towards the end of the month. We'll have more information on that next week. And there's lots of old webinars on there as well. If you missed them, feel free to check those out, as well as all of the episodes of Technado that have ever come out ever in the history of the show. So please go watch them when you have free time. So I think that's pretty much going to be it for this episode, unless I am forgetting anything.
No, now we'll start our never-ending saga of tracking down additional tech news as it occurs over the following week.
Sure, that'll be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no shortage.
And, of course, all the latest news on the Ghostbusters series
as
well.
We'll keep you apprised.
This is where you come for that hard-hitting information. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Tech Noombat, and we will see you next week.